The cream-colored wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter like a gilded insult. Embossed in gold foil and scripted in dramatic calligraphy, you are cordially invited to the wedding of Madison Elizabeth Collins and James Harrison Sterling. 3 at the Fairmont Grand Ballroom. My younger sister's name glared at me like it always had, demanding attention, admiration, and submission. It was funny, really. The girl who once mocked my plain cardigans and quiet habits was now having the wedding of her dreams, while I, Emma Richardson, was expected to simply show up, sit in the back row, and clap like the obedient older sister Mom had called that morning, as she often did when guilt was the flavor of the day. Emma, Madison really wants you there. It would mean a lot to the family. We're all so proud of how far she's come. As if I hadn't come far. As if I were still the unambitious one who took care of Grandma when she was sick, or the one who stayed behind to help Dad with the bills, while Madison ran off to New York, pretending she came from a dynasty. Instead of a crumbling split-level house with broken windows and older cars, I looked out the window at the skyline in the distance. My skyline. They didn't know. They couldn't know. In their eyes, I was still Emma the librarian. Emma the one who never left town. Emma the nobody. What they didn't see was the suite I lived in, the investment firm I quietly built under a pseudonym, or the media company I had recently acquired, one that, by some twist of fate, had signed a promotional deal with Madison's future husband's startup. That irony tasted sweeter than any dessert Madison would serve at her overpriced reception, but I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I had spent years learning how to become invisible while building something indestructible. My world was elegance, discretion, and strategy. I didn't want them to clap for me. I wanted them to learn what it felt like to overlook the wrong woman. My assistant, Nora, stepped into the room holding my itinerary. You've been invited to the rehearsal dinner, private rooftop at the Marlowe Hotel. Do you want to attend? As Emma Richardson or as Evelyn Royce? Evelyn Royce, the name I used when I bought companies, signed multi-million-dollar deals, or appeared anonymously on Forbes lists. A name no one in my family knew. I smiled. Emma, just Emma. Let the shock come naturally. The Marlowe was glowing when I arrived, an Art Deco masterpiece nestled between glass towers. The rooftop shimmered with candles and chandeliers, florals imported from France. Of course Madison would want a wedding. That screamed royalty, even if our bloodline was strictly suburban. I slipped past the valet, dressed in a navy silk gown that hinted at wealth but whispered discretion. Heads turned. My own mother did a double take before she recognized me. Emma? She said, adjusting her pearls. You look lovely. Translation: expensive. Thank you, Mom. Madison floated toward me in an ivory jumpsuit that probably cost more than my entire high school wardrobe. Her eyes widened. Emma, wow, you actually came. I wouldn't miss it. She glanced at my clutch Dior, then my shoes Manolo. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Before she could ask, James her fiancé stepped forward, the picture of Ivy League charm. Emma, right? Madison's sister. We've never officially met, but I've heard stories. I extended a hand, my smile steady. Only the good ones, I hope. Of course, he said, though I could see the same polite distance in his eyes that I saw in Madison's. I was not important, not a threat, just a placeholder in the family tree. But that would change, because next week, James's startup would receive an investment offer too good to ignore from Royce Holdings. They didn't know I owned it. Not yet. As dinner was served, I took my seat at the far end of the table, next to Great Aunt Helen, who couldn't remember what day it was but still had opinions on everyone's outfits. Madison toasted to love, legacy, and the people who shaped us. No one mentioned me. Not when they listed supporters. Not when they reminisced about childhood. Not even when they talked about overcoming challenges I had solved behind the scenes more than once. But I didn't need their praise. What I needed was the moment when the veil lifted, and Madison realized the woman she spent her life dismissing was now the architect of her future. That moment was coming. I raised my glass and smiled. To legacies, I whispered. To mine. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Nora. Royce Holdings' offer has been delivered. Sterling Innovations will receive the documents today. I leaned back in my chair, sipping espresso on the balcony of my penthouse. The same skyline my family believed was a fantasy for people like us stretched endlessly before me. If only they knew. They still thought I lived in a modest townhouse outside the city because that's what I let them believe. They didn't know that Royce Holdings, the private equity firm making waves across Silicon Valley, was mine, built in silence, forged in grit, and now, poised to acquire controlling interest in Sterling Innovations, James Sterling's baby. Funny how things came full circle. Later that day, I met up with my childhood friend and legal counsel, Tasha, at our usual cafe in Midtown. Tasha was the only person from my past who knew the truth. She had seen the nights I slept under my desk and worked 2 jobs to fund my first investment fund. So it's happening? She asked, sliding me a scone. By next week, we'll own a 51% stake. James will think it's a blessing. He won't realize it's me until after the wedding. Tasha raised a brow. You're really going to drop it after the vows? I want Madison to say I do, thinking she's winning, just like she always did. By Saturday morning, I arrived at the bridal suite where the women of my family buzzed around Madison like bees to sugar. Makeup brushes swirled, champagne flutes clinked, and stylists started around like set designers. Emma, over here, Mom called. Hold her veil. I obeyed like I always had, dutiful, calm, invisible. Madison turned, her reflection glowing in the full-length mirror. Do I look powerful? You look stunning, I said, and meant it. She did, like a woman born for admiration. But power? That would come from somewhere else entirely. She grinned. James and I are going to be unstoppable. Sterling Innovations just got a massive investor lined up. Once it finalizes, we're going public within the year. I fought the smile twitching at my lips. Oh, I said, feigning surprise. What investor? Some group called Royce Holdings. They're mysterious but loaded. James said the lead partner is a ghost, no one's seen them. That's rare. Exactly, she said proudly. That's how you know it's elite. Anyway, the firm is sending someone to the wedding, probably to scout us. Can you believe it? My wedding is going to have investors watching from the audience. Her voice laced with glee, oblivious to the irony. Must feel amazing, I said, pinning her veil. She looked at me through the mirror. I mean, you wouldn't get it, Emma. You've always been more comfortable. You like stability, simplicity. That's not a bad thing, of course. There it was, that condescension wrapped in concern. She didn't mean it as an insult. She truly believed I was living a quiet, small life. And maybe part of me had played into that role for too long. She turned to face me, hands on my arms. I'm glad you're here though. It means a lot. You're the only sister I have, even if we're so different. I smiled. Different isn't bad. Sometimes it's just misinterpreted. She blinked, then turned as the wedding coordinator announced it was time. The Fairmont Grand Ballroom looked like something out of a royal movie set. Gold leaf ceilings, cascading white orchids, soft violins playing. The elite of both families filled the seats. I took mine near the back, but not too far. I didn't want to miss a thing. From the stage, James stood nervously adjusting his cufflinks. His best man whispered something that made him laugh. I studied his movements like a chess player about to declare checkmate. Nora texted. Documents signed. Ownership transfer underway. You're officially majority shareholder. The music changed. Everyone stood. Madison appeared, glowing, ethereal, triumphant. She walked down the aisle with all the confidence of a woman stepping into her dynasty, into a life she believed she had earned. I stayed seated a beat longer than everyone else, then rose slowly, clapping once as her eyes met mine. The ceremony was short. Vows, kisses, applause. A new couple declared. A future crowned. They had no idea that their new kingdom was already owned by the woman in row 3. The reception. I wandered near the dessert bar, where James had momentarily escaped the crowd. Emma, right? He said, wine glass in hand. That's right. Madison says you're a librarian? I smiled. She says a lot of things. He laughed. You seem smarter than that. I mean, not that librarians aren't smart, but I know what you mean. I think Royce Holdings might be here tonight, he whispered, as if it were classified. They said the lead partner would send someone discreet, probably already watching us. Maybe, he sipped. Whoever it is, I want to impress them. This investment is going to change everything. It already has. He gave me a puzzled look, but before he could ask more, Madison called him to the dance floor. See you around, Emma. He said, oh, you definitely will, because the woman you never noticed just bought your company. The reception was in full swing, champagne towers glittering, Orchestras playing medleys of pop hits on violins, Madison twirling on the dance floor like she owned the world. Except she didn't, not anymore. I stood near the back, sipping a flute of Dom Pérignon, watching it all unfold with the quiet patience of someone who had waited a decade for this moment. Around me, guests gushed over the couple, comparing James's IPO ambitions to some startup golden boy, while Madison soaked in the compliments like sunlight. From across the room, Tasha gave me a small nod. Everything was in motion. The final paperwork had landed in James's inbox while he toasted to the bright future of Sterling Innovations. He didn't even know that with his digital signature, he'd just signed control of the company over to me. By midnight, I would be CEO. He would just be a figurehead if I allowed him to stay. I didn't stay long. Slipped away as the cake was cut and noticed, as always. But this time, it was intentional. Let them enjoy their final hours believing they were kings and queens. The real coronation was happening elsewhere at Royce Holdings HQ, where a press release was scheduled to go live at M-sharp. I walked into my penthouse that night, shoes in hand, hair still curled from the wedding prep, and poured myself a final drink. I stared at the city lights, remembering every time my mother said, "You're not ambitious like Madison," and every time Madison had told me, "You just don't think big enough, Emma." And yet here I was bigger than all of them. The next morning, I arrived at Sterling Innovations' executive floor just after 8 o'clock a.m., dressed in sharp navy silk, heels clicking with intention. Most of the staff didn't recognize me. To them, I was just another high-level investor visitor until I stepped into the boardroom and took the seat at the head of the table. The executives filtered in slowly. Some wore confused expressions. A few had already seen the news on Bloomberg. James was the last to enter. He looked rumpled, likely hungover from the reception, his tie loose. He froze when he saw me in his chair. "Emma, good morning, Mr. Sterling," I said calmly, offering him a printed copy of the acquisition agreement. As of 8:01 this morning, Royce Holdings holds 51% of Sterling Innovations. I've decided to step in personally as managing director. Effective immediately. He laughed awkwardly. "What? This must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied, sliding him the digital confirmation from the SEC. "You signed the agreement yourself. Didn't you read it?" He blinked, then looked down at the papers. "But Royce Holdings is just some shadow firm." I thought it was elite, I said, arching a brow. "It is." He sank into the seat across from me, pale. "You're the head of Royce Holdings?" "I built it. While you and Madison were laughing about my simple life, while your IPO stalled for the third time, while Madison mocked my hobbies, while my own parents said I was just the quiet one, I was building a $2.3 billion portfolio." He stared at me in stunned silence. The boardroom was pin-drop quiet. I turned to the others. "Let me be clear. I'm not here to gut this company. I'm here to grow it. But effective immediately, this leadership team reports to me. I'll be conducting performance reviews over the next month. Those who contribute stay. Those who don't, I let the sentence hang." One executive cleared her throat and nodded quickly. Another started applauding. James sat motionless, blinking. "You played us," he whispered. "No," I replied. "You ignored me. There's a difference." I left the building before noon. I had no interest in dragging things out. I'd made my point. The Sterling family chat was already blowing up. Madison had sent a flurry of messages. "Why is your name all over my husband's company? Emma, WHAT did you do? We need to talk now." I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I met Tasha at our favorite rooftop bar. She handed me a printed copy of Forbes. The article had just gone live. "The ghost investor behind Royce Holdings steps into the light. Meet Emma Richardson." Beneath it was my photograph taken last week in my office. Sharp line power suit. Expression unreadable. "You ready for the firestorm?" Tasha asked, raising her glass. "I've lived through worse," I said. She smirked. "You know Madison's probably throwing things at her honeymoon suite TV right now." I laughed. "She'll survive. Or she won't." That evening, I did what no one expected. I attended my parents' post-wedding brunch. The room fell silent when I walked in. My mother looked up from her mimosa, stunned. Madison glared daggers at me from across the room, still in her white bride robe. James didn't speak. My father finally broke the silence. "Emma, what on earth is going on?" I smiled politely. "I just wanted to see everyone before I head to Geneva. We're expanding the fund. I'll be gone a few months." My mother blinked. Expanding what fund? Royce Holdings, I said casually, sipping my coffee. Did you not see Forbes this morning? Madison stood abruptly. You humiliated me. I shrugged. No, Madison, you humiliated yourself. You built your entire world on looking powerful. I built mine by being powerful. She flushed. You were supposed to be the quiet one. I was, until I wasn't. The gala was just days away. I could hardly sleep. Every thread of this moment had been stitched for years: disappointment, exile, quiet building, and now, revelation. Yet part of me still ached with the wounds of the past, wondering if they would ever understand. Not forgive perhaps, but understand. The Richardson Family Foundation Gala was a formal affair held annually at the Grand Ballroom of the Luna Hotel. I had attended once as a teenager, sitting at the far end of a long table, while my father, sister, and cousins accepted awards and accolades. That year, I wasn't even mentioned. Now, my name was about to be everywhere. I stepped into the ballroom early that evening to do a final walkthrough with the event coordinator. The space glittered with crystal chandeliers and velvet-draped tables, but my gaze landed on the podium, my podium. In mere hours, I'd stand behind it and reveal what none of them could have imagined. I wore a floor-length black gown with sleek lines and a dramatic neckline. It was powerful, elegant, timeless. Everything I had become. By 7 o'clock p.m., the room was filled with the city's elite. Journalists, philanthropists, CEOs, many of whom had unknowingly partnered with or benefited from my ventures. I stayed near the wings, watching guests mingle, my heart steady despite the adrenaline humming beneath my skin. At 7:30, the lights dimmed. A hush fell. My father walked on stage first, clearly not recognizing the change in the event script. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for joining us to celebrate the Richardson legacy and its commitment to innovation and excellence. I stepped forward just as he prepared to introduce my sister. If I may, I said smoothly into the mic as I joined him at center stage. There's been a slight update to the evening's program. He looked stunned. The murmurs began immediately. I'd like to thank you all for attending not just any gala, I continued, but the announcement of something deeply personal and long overdue. My father's confusion grew as I turned to him gently. Dad, this year's biggest donor wasn't Charlotte. It wasn't the board. It was me. You could have heard a pin drop. I'm Emma Richardson, I said clearly, turning to the room. Founder and CEO of Elaris Group, which, over the past 8 years, has quietly acquired several subsidiaries tied to the Richardson portfolio. Tonight, I'm officially unveiling our latest venture, an education fund to support underprivileged girls in STEM, fully endowed by proceeds from my companies. Charlotte rose from her seat slowly, face paling. You, what? I smiled at her, not with malice, but clarity. You thought I was working in logistics. You never asked what kind of logistics. Elaris doesn't ship packages, Charlotte. We build the infrastructure that lets companies move $40 billion of goods a year. My father took a slow step back. Emma, you did all this without us? Not without you, I corrected gently. Because of you. I turned to the crowd again, locking eyes with old mentors, ex-colleagues, and even a few former family friends. For years, I was told I wasn't the right kind of Richardson. Too quiet, too plain, too soft. So I stopped trying to earn a seat at your table and built my own instead. There was silence, then scattered applause, then a wave of it. I nodded as the lights rose. Later, as guests approached me one by one congratulating me, requesting interviews, offering partnerships, I caught Charlotte staring from across the room, glass of champagne frozen in her hand. I walked over to her. You always said I wasn't meant for the spotlight, I said quietly. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Well, I smiled. I'm not in it. I own it now. The night of the gala ended with a kind of electric stillness. Cameras had flashed. Hands had been shaken. Every guest left with a new understanding of the Richardson family and of me. But it was the next morning when the real shift began. Headlines exploded across business outlets and social media. The forgotten daughter behind a billion-dollar empire, Emma Richardson, CEO of Elaris, shocks the industry with surprise identity reveal. Richardson family legacy rewritten. I stayed home that day, not out of fear but because I wanted to watch it unfold from the house I had built with my own hands. I sipped tea on my balcony as interview requests poured in, and the calls I used to long for from my father and sister now buzzed unanswered on silent. By noon, my assistant forwarded me a voicemail from my father. His voice cracked somewhere near the end. Emma, I don't know how we missed it. I don't know how I missed you. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you out of the family business. But you didn't need protection. You needed belief. And we failed you there. I closed the message without reply. Some words don't need answers. That weekend, I visited the old Richardson estate. I hadn't stepped inside the gates since the day Charlotte told me I didn't belong. The grounds looked smaller now, less intimidating. I wasn't the scared girl clinging to approval anymore. Charlotte was waiting on the steps. You've made your point, she said flatly. I paused. It was never about making a point. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I left here. She looked away. So what happens now? You take over everything? I shook my head. No, I have my own empire. I don't need to take yours. I handed her an envelope. Inside was a full proposal. I'm offering a merger, I said. Not out of pity but vision. You're good at branding. I'm good at infrastructure. We can do more together if you're willing to see me as an equal. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the papers. You'd trust me? No, I said calmly. I'd partner with you. Trust is earned, just like respect. We stood in silence. Then, for the first time in years, she nodded, not dismissively, not out of formality but with the smallest hint of recognition. Later that month, at the official announcement of the Elaris Richardson Innovation Fund, reporters asked me what message I hoped my story sent. I smiled, that sometimes, the most underestimated people aren't weak. They're patient, and when they rise, they don't just rise alone, they build bridges for others to follow. Now, years later, I walk through the halls of a foundation bearing my name. Not Richardson, not my father's legacy, mine. Young women stop me to say thank you. Girls who once thought they had to look a certain way, speak a certain way, or be born into a certain family to be taken seriously. I tell them the truth. You don't need to be invited to the table. You can build your own. And when you do, make it wide enough for others. As for me, I no longer live in the shadows of a name that once defined me. I redefined it. I am Emma Richardson, not just the daughter, not just the sister, but the architect of my own legacy.